Welcome to On Trauma and Power. I'm your host, Jenn Turner, co-founder of the Center for Trauma and Embodiment. I'm so glad you're here with us. Each episode, I sit down with different experts, educators, authors, survivors, and practitioners, sharing different trauma-informed experiences across various fields. Join us as we explore the complex intersections of trauma and power through embodied healing and diverse perspectives in both our personal and collective healing journeys. Let's dive on in. Thank you so much for being here, Candace. I'm so glad you're joining me for this conversation and that we get to have a conversation where we just think and share and explore.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's long overdue. It's always fun talking to you, Jen, so I'm excited to see where this conversation takes you.
Same. Well, let me introduce you to our guests and then hand it over to you for a little embodiment moment. So Candace is a native Mississippian, mother of two, and a certified fitness coach through NASM and USA Weightlifting, USAW, who blends social justice and wellness to create inclusive, meaningful spaces where all bodies can thrive. She is the founder of the Center for Body Autonomy and director of Trauma-Informed Weightlifting, TIWL. As a TEDx speaker, award-winning activist, and performance artist, Candace has led national campaigns addressing race and gender-based oppression, sexual violence, and mass incarceration. She is deeply committed to movement-based healing, body liberation, and passionately exploring what freedom can feel like in our bodies. That's pretty badass.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. You read that so lovely. This would be a great time for us to kind of open it up with a little bit of movement, get into your bodies a little bit. This is actually one of the practices I brought into trauma-informed weightlifting from my experience as a dance fitness coach and dance fitness instructor. Thinking about how it feels when you're walking into this really big studio and someone is asking you to spread your body far and wide, and how often there can be a sense of not quite knowing how wide to get, how much space to take up. And so I call this exercise literally just taking up space. And so you can do this seated, or you can stand up, you can move around, whatever feels good. But I want you to first start just by looking around, just taking a survey of just all the space that is around you. And you may notice that your head starts moving in different directions, looking behind you, above you, beneath you, to the sides. If you feel a stretch and you decide to stay there for a second, go ahead and stay there. And in mind, thinking of all of this space that you've now captured with your eyes, start to imagine like your body expanding. So you may consider opening your arms wide, or maybe even spreading your legs. Or if you want to keep your hands close to you, you can keep your hands close to you. And let's move in all directions of all of the space around us. I encourage you to consider extending as far as you can. You may wiggle your fingers so that the air around the space moves through your fingers. You may reach down to your feet. And again, don't forget about behind you and above you. And now that you've kind of surveyed all of this space around you, I want you to make some cups with your hands, just like this. And you can reach out and grab all of this space that you've now thrown your energy around inside of, and bring it back inside of your body. And allow that space to fill up. Fill up your lungs, your chest, your belly. If it feels good, we'll finish this off by just taking one big deep breath just to let the space settle. Go deep in through your nose and let it out. Our space now. My space
Thank you. I love that. That's so cool. I think I've done that with you one other time.
now. We have Jenn. Good
And
times.
I think so much about how when you do that, how we're encouraged to not take up space, or some of us are encouraged to take up space and some of us are not. And depending on our identities or, you know, where
Mhm.
we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very common reflection after doing this exercise. I've heard it multiple times, right? Like, nobody's ever given me permission to take up space in this way. I felt like I needed permission in the first place, and I can understand how some of that can be very complicated. Like, what does it mean for us to take up space inside of even like power or privilege or access or ability? But also, what feels very important is that we're able to take up all this space around us, and nothing in this moment of exercise is like harmed because of it, right? Like, we can just do this exercise, even metaphorically, metaphysically, right? And we still, um, and the world doesn't crash open because we were too loud or took up too much space in this moment. And that reminds me a lot of weightlifting, in the sense of, we pick up the heavy things all the time, and then we drop them back down to the ground, and, you know, hopefully we walk away with no injuries. Yeah.
That's so powerful. Yeah. And I wonder too if people ever have like an adverse reaction to that. Like, ooh, I found I didn't want to take up space or it felt unsafe in some way.
I think so. And, um, I'm thinking of this moment that I led this particular exercise. It was much more involved. Like, we were actually doing very synchronized movements during that time. And, I remember this one person did not feel comfortable like expanding their body in that way. Not, it's one thing to think about taking up space. It's another thing to like physically do that with your body. Um, and I think that's important to recognize. I mean, in that moment, she was able to articulate, I don't feel comfortable doing this. This is actually very uncomfortable. Um, and, but I think that's a common sentiment when this is also someone who's been told to be very quiet most of their life. They were a very quiet person, very reserved, very soft spoken, and kind of always situated themselves in like a little tight pocket, right? And so I think that gives us the opportunity then in that practice to explore, like, are our hands going to be close to us, or do we want to stretch them out? Do we want to bring it into our body and just keep it there for a while before we let our limbs go back into space? So it's definitely a curiosity prompt as well, and a lot of space to reflect and learn about ourselves.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It definitely has me thinking a lot. Well, I wonder if we can kind of start like a bit of a looking backwards and kind of how you got to this work. I don't know if you would be up for sharing a bit about like how you got oriented and started weightlifting for yourself in your life and kind of your journey around that.
Yeah, sure, sure. Um, I mean, so one, I don't actually identify as a lifter, and I don't know why. It just doesn't feel right to me. Um, I definitely identify as like a trainer and a coach and a fitness enthusiast. I became a coach thinking about um, some of my experience growing up in Mississippi and my family. And I really got into this work as a layer just to have preventative maintenance. So on my dad's side, I've lost 6 family members, both uncles and aunts, from a form of muscular dystrophy called spinocerebellar ataxia, or Mikado-Joseph's disease. And it's an aggressive form of muscular dystrophy. Your mental faculties stay present, but your body begins to slowly deteriorate. You begin to your muscle atrophies, right? Coordination is lost. It affects the cerebellum and actually shrinks the cerebellum. And so that, it supports control and balance and all those things. And so I played pretty much every sport imaginable in high school. uh, Felt like I was pretty badass, you know. I ended up going to college for softball. Had all kind of offers, and you know, I realized that movement, not just in sport, but also through like ritual and celebration and community, was deeply a part of my identity. And in the moments that I did not have it to access, I felt like I could not stay disciplined in anything else. So I said, you know what? Let me just take this preventative measure and become a trainer. So in 2010, I got certified through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And actually, right now, there's only one cousin who has the disease. There was some time that I exhibited symptoms, but it never fully formed. You know, thank God, thank universe, thanks job. But yeah, that was really my entry into it. It was very much so personal and protective, and I wanted to teach people also how to, you know, strengthen their bodies for whatever form of resistance or barriers they ultimately will indefinitely face. Like something will happen that where you can tap into the strength that you've created in your body. And so that became a part of my mission.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from early age, it sounds like you found your body as a resource and a big part of your life.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And then, you know, and also like I'm born 1984, it's before cell phones. I'm in Mississippi. You know, our parents kicked us out the house and we came back right before the street lights came on. So I was out. I was riding bikes around town, playing basketball, softball. You know, we're walking well across the railroad tracks. So it was just so much movement and so little distraction growing up then. And even though we did have cell phones and technology, they didn't become a focal feature until later on. So also just growing up in that kind of environment, where movement was just a part of the culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a
Yeah.
different world, right? Such a different
Yeah.
world. So I guess, you know, one of the things I'm kind of interested in too is how, you know, you think about and whether we're thinking, you know, weightlifting as it's organized in trauma-informed weightlifting or your relationship to training and embodiment in general. But, you know, what are ways that your kind of approach has challenged traditional fitness norms? Because when I think about the work that you all do at Trauma Informed Weightlifting, I think there's so much of that happening that is so fascinating and important.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I think first I will say that when I graduated from personal trainer school, I was very much so cliche mainstream fitness. I was like, oh, you want a big booty? Come to me. Flat abs, tighten it up, tone, all the things. Lose weight, feel great. I got out of personal trainer school and did all the cliche stuff, but it didn't take long for me to realize that that really didn't align with who I was. That didn't align with my purpose for getting in training in the first place. So I think one way that my approach disrupts mainstream fitness culture is that I think that just that point again, like what does it mean for us to have what I like to call full body processing power, which means which means that there's a synergy between what our body feels, what our emotions feels, what we are mentally thinking, and we're able to activate all these different parts of ourselves at one time to move through moments, move through life, and be informed by our bodies. And so I've integrated that very deeply into even like my own programs that I've offered. My last program, Fortify Fitness, I haven't ran it since I've been a part of Trauma Informed Weightlifting because it takes so much. I think I ran it maybe one time actually. But you know, we were doing things like brushing our teeth with our non-dominant hand, understanding the way that grief works when we have been in, you know, a program that requires us to lift weights for 4 days out the week, knowing that our body is going to change. understanding that it's changing sometimes visibly, sometimes physically, and sometimes, inside where we really can't see it, but we can feel it. Our energy level change, the way we may eat changes, and then like navigating through that loss or that gain of identity through weightlifting in that way. We definitely, or something that I've definitely encouraged also is, again, like how does this translate, this work that we're doing, thinking about the why beyond aesthetic goals. What is going to keep you? Oh, this is one of my favorite questions when I take on a new client. It's like, all right, just imagine that the reason that you came here, it was this. Let's say I don't know that reason. Tell me what would change in your life, right? If you did stay committed for this 90 days or 120 days, what would change? And I love that question because the response is never something like, "Oh yeah, my ass will be so fat, everyone will love me." It's always something like, I would wake up earlier and I would work in my garden because I really want to plant some vegetables and I don't know how to, but I would wake up and do that. And then I would teach my kids how to do it. And then we would just grow a garden. Or I would take more trips because I haven't been on a trip in like 10 years and I really want to see the beach. And I want to go there, but I just don't feel like I have the energy to do so, or I'll start working on cars, ride motorcycles, right? I'll ride a motorcycle across country, and to hear those responses, um, I guess again, kind of has been an affirmation of like, this is why we can disrupt mainstream fitness culture, remove this idea that people get into this fitness work or weightlifting work because they're just thinking about how their body looks to themselves or to the opposite sex or gender.
I love that. It's a tool to live your life more fully or as you would like to live it.
Yeah, yeah, that
That's
feels good.
interesting. One thing you said too that I wanted to just like highlight was I think a lot of times we think about training or weightlifting or anything like this as a net positive. And I love that you named the grief that people can experience as these changes happen. And I wonder if you could say a little more about that. Like that really surprised me. And also I resonate with it so much.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so my programs are usually 90 days, and we would have a week of grief around week 4. Because by that time, something is changing, something noticeable is changing. Um, I think ways that grief show up vary, vary so much from, you know, realizing that your body needs or is desiring different types of food. Maybe you just had a rigid diet at first and now your body is like meat or beans or something or candy. Like your body starts craving different things. Other things is right, the physical changes that happen. Um, thinking, I mean, I'm thinking about one client I had who they didn't lose any weight the first 4 weeks, but their body composition changed dramatically in 4 weeks. This is probably one of the biggest sort of changes I have ever seen with anybody I had worked with. And while I guess outside looking in, people will say, "Oh, like this was a great change and a change for the better," right? For my client, it was it was too dramatic. It was jolting to the senses, right? They did not see themselves in the mirror anymore. And so they felt like they had to look for themselves in the mirror. Like, where did I go? Like a part of me is missing now. And so I think that was very early on in my fitness work. And to have that experience and work through that with the client really was the inspiration that inspired me to add that section into my training. And then I began to discover other ways that grief showed up for people. The realizing that maybe as they started to do more for themselves in the name of self-love, they started to recognize maybe relationships that didn't fit in that self-love spectrum, they jobs that didn't fit in the self-love spectrum, behaviors, habits, all these things that have definitely become a part of their long-term and present identity were changing, and they didn't know why. And that can be very painful it can be very painful for a number of reasons. But yeah, grief is very much so a part of this work. And I also think about what does it mean to engage in strength training and feel a sense of release. Just the word release itself can be very activating for the sensations that follow of grief, right? Because you release something, and maybe you felt like that would always belong to you, and now it doesn't.
Wow. I think you said something in there too, that the self-love piece, and how it's not something, when I think about my work as a talk therapist, helping someone to cultivate self-love is a really complicated practice. But when it comes from an embodied place, like I observe this in yoga as well, it's so different in terms of how it can take root. And I wonder how you cultivate a space of self-love, whether we're talking about trauma-informed weightlifting or really any of your work, but that isn't too heavy-handed, because I think that can also be alienating. If you're like, hey, come and, strength train with me, and we're going to work on self-love. People are like, this is not my place. This is not where I belong. Like, what?
Right. Yeah. In our trainings with trauma informed weightlifting, I have to remind people that they still can be themselves. I have to remind the coaches and trainers and, practitioners who come throughout that they can still very much so be themselves. They don't have to turn into like a self-love guru. They don't have to soften their voice, talk in a very specific tone, right? Like, weightlifters and fitness folks, they oftentimes have a lot of energy, or they have big energy, or they may be quiet and still could bulldoze over a bulldozer. So, so I guess for me to answer that question, about a year after I came on the TIWL, remember that time I did say I ran my program? It was a shorter version. I was working with people who I had worked with before at some point years earlier. And we would have this Sunday session every week. We would all meet up virtually, and we would talk about like how the week went inside the program. And they turned one of the calls into an intervention for me. And they said, it was like, I don't know what's going on with your coach, but I missed a workout and you kind of gave me a little bit too much grace, and I don't feel comfortable with that. Like, what's going on with you? Where are you? I actually feel safer when you cuss. When you don't cuss, I feel like, hold on, what's going on? And so another person would chime in, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this what I think it is? Yes, it was an intervention. And but all that to say that, having or cultivating my own authenticity about who I am and what's my identity in this work has been so very important, because no, I am not the person to say, all right, y'all, let's bring it all in for the self-love circle. I am not that person. I would say something like, all right, you have a choice. You can either tell me like one beautiful thing about yourself that you learned this week, or you can do 30 push-ups. What feels good to you today? You let me know. And then we still do 30 push-ups. So
I love it. Like playfulness and energy.
Yeah.
I think, so much of what I think about when I think about trauma too, though, is like oftentimes people are coming to us with self-hatred, self-loathing, and it's like somehow a relational miss to feel, or a sense of not belonging. And again, this may happen more in the yoga world versus the weightlifting world, but there's a lot of this like soothing, loving energy that I think people feel like they don't deserve when they've experienced trauma and they've had this kind of hurt and pain. And so it's almost like a barrier for entry. It's like, ooh, that's not for me, because I don't feel that way about myself. And so I think,
Wow.
yeah, I think that there's a way that sometimes when we lead too strongly with that, it excludes people from where they're really at, which could be at a place of self hatred. And are they still welcome? And what is it like to create a space where someone who has that, burden and pain that they're carrying can also feel like they belong?
Yeah. Wow, that's some powerful stuff there, Jen. I can I can I can definitely see that. I'm thinking of like how would that translate in the weightlifting community? And maybe one thing I've noticed is you said it felt like they didn't deserve it. Maybe in the weightlifting community it feels like I have to earn it to get it.
Interesting.
So I have to sacrifice my body. I have to go harder than I'm really beyond my capacity. I have to prove what I'm capable of. And to be in like that supportive space that like say someone does find that supportive gym where everyone is celebrated and people clap for you in a circle and all of that stuff, right? Um, even I may notice some of that there too. I avoid those circles personally. I um I avoid being like the center of someone's affection or praise or affirmation. If I can kind of like hide in the shadows during those moments, I will. um, and so, yeah, I think that's a very interesting. That's a very interesting thought.
I guess too, I
Mhm.
wonder if there's a way that people these are drawn to strength training or drawn to training in general and weightlifting because it's like I can deserve love or appreciation when my body looks like this or when my body can do this thing. But then it ends up becoming a completely different journey. Like maybe that's the entry point or that's the draw at times.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, there's all this other exploration to happen and growth and change.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I mean, even for folks who I'm in community with, right? I can definitely acknowledge like they will get into weightlifting or get into like fitness for one thing, and then it definitely changes. They see the benefit to their mental health. They see the benefit to their clarity, their energy levels, and they're like, all right, I can stick around. Um, I think on the flip side too, which may be a little different too than yoga, because I've done yoga and walked out and woke up the next morning sore and mad because it was so slow and I didn't see it coming. And so it felt like it just crept up on me and infiltrated into my skin versus, versus like being in the weight room and that you're going to feel this. You're going and so, seeing so many folks like really push themselves to capacity in that way in order to generate a sense of sensation that they know is going to be coming, a day later or
That's
2 days
interesting.
later. Um, I think that with the communities and how they kind of split off into yoga, weightlifting, then you have that, overachieving few in the middle who gravitate towards both.
Yep.
um, a lot of weightlifters like are terrified of yoga. They're terrified of that because it requires so much embodiment, so much interoception, so much breath synchronicity, and maybe there's some incense or some frequencies playing in the background, right? Or getting into the weight room and lifting heavy requires you to not tap in so deeply interoceptively. The interoception can come before or after the big lifts, and that's our ability to sense those internal feelings, those internal sensations, and reconcile with those. But when you're doing a big lift, you are very much so task oriented, and you have to recruit your muscles in synergy with a certain level of coordination to lift the thing up all at once and then put it back down. And and so there's maybe more moments where it's not so much like tapping into those inner parts. It's also like what is the task at hand? How can I recruit all at once for this big movement? And then after that movement, take a moment and get into myself. get into my
Interesting.
field. Yeah.
Interesting. So it's almost like you're getting an opportunity to like move away from interoception and then move toward it at different, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, depending on what you're doing. Yeah, I mean, because there's ways to do it. And I think like big Olympic lifts. Maybe folks are more familiar with like just seeing Olympic lifters do cleans and jerks. Um, like how those lifts in the moment, it's really hard to pay attention to like one specific muscle group or
Fair. Yep.
one specific hinge, right? As you perfect the movement, you can, but if you're lifting heavy, everything has to work in tandem. Otherwise, you are setting yourself up for injury. So it does feel like there's opportunity inside of weightlifting to jump inside of interoception and then jump out of it into proprioception, exteroception, task oriented, synergistic coordination.
So cool.
Yeah.
Hearing you talk about that also reminds me that I would love for you to share with everyone about the relationship of like managing stress and adding stress sometimes with weight and how you explore that in relationship to trauma. I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. And we talk about this a lot in trauma informed weightlifting, this concept of therapeutic dosing using weights. And well, first, weights are stressful. Gravity is stressful. So when we say weightlifting, we're not just talking about, dumbbells and, big barbells. We're also talking about body weight as well. But when thinking about stress, I'm often reminded that we are existing in ways, especially with social media, like on full blast, where we're exposed to non-consensual stress all the time. It's coming from here, it's coming from
Fair.
there, it's coming from the music, it's coming from, whatever. Every time we open our phone, things that are going on in our lives. But when you go into the weight room and you lift up a heavy thing, you are applying stress to your body. Except this time it's consensual. So I can do this lift and consent to the stress of performing this movement, and also feel like that's my choice. There's a necessary function of stress, right? Because it does allow us more room to adapt, and respond and expands our capacity. And so with weightlifting, we can essentially try to find a sweet spot of the stress. We want to stress enough that the body and the person can adapt. We don't want to stress so much that it could potentially lead into negative feelings or negative sensations, right? Or being like overstressed or hyperactivated inside of it. But having that agency to consent to the stress inside your body, I think is very powerful for trauma survivors. Because it's not just the weight itself, it's also being able to respond and request, right? Like, I need a little bit longer of a rest break before I go through this stress again. Or I'm not stressed enough. Let's add a plate here. Or maybe I need a rest day in between sessions because I'm managing this stress so that it works in my favor and I can show up in a more full way.
That's
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah.
I how do you what are some of the ways that you build a relationship where that can happen, where there is a sense and a trust in it's not just what Candace wants me to do or, but this is actually me gaining internal consent, not just pleasing or any of the things that we might typically do in relationship.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question, Jan. Um, I think first, when to have a trauma informed approach to weightlifting, it collaboration is key. Um, I ask the question, what sort of movements do you not like? And if I can avoid programming too many of those movements, I will, because why would I want you to do something that you don't like? I want you to want to come. I want you to have an enjoyable experience. And so that's the first thing, is just shying away from those movements altogether if possible. Um, Now, there may be some times where right? Learning a particular movement is necessary to get to more complex movements. But even how that's integrated can be very much so collaborative. So I'm thinking about, let's say somebody, let's say pull-ups. I work with a lot of people that just absolutely despise pull-ups. Fine. But it's interesting. The folks who despise pull-ups the most are the ones who want to know how to do a pull-up. I despise them because I can't do them. So I can't either. I have eczema on my hand. I know you can't see it, and I'm not going to show it. You can probably see it, but it actually affects me in all kind of different ways. So I usually am wearing gloves, but it hurts for me to grip in that way and lift my body weight up, or ropes and things like that. It's actually very uncomfortable. Um, but there's so many other ways we can do it. Maybe I start with TRX bands where they're leaning back and having to pull themselves up that way, right? Or they're rowing, or we are just mimicking the movement without doing it, so that they can at least have the sensation of pulling without having to go directly to a pull up. That feels important. I also think part of the collaboration piece is having very clear signals of when things don't feel good, and not leaving that up to guess, or not assuming that someone feels like they have the agency to tell me, right? So even just, and this comes from the pleasure world, even if it's just red, yellow, green, like red, I'm not ready. They don't have to say a whole sentence. They don't have to explain themselves to me. Like, I know when I hear this cue that this is my time to pause. I also know that if I hear this cue, because we would have already had this conversation, I would have already asked them, when things become too difficult or too stressful, or you need that time to pause, what do you want me to do? Sometimes that means affirm me. Tell me to shake it off and go. Sometimes it means just give me a second, go to the other side of the room. Sometimes it means just keep asking me when I'm ready so I can stay present. But even working through those questions can offer a lot of room to build trust, and them to feel like they have a voice in like what's happening in the sessions.
Well, I can imagine there's a self-discovery process too, because
Yeah.
if you and I were starting to train now and you asked me in this moment what I would need, it's probably really different from once we've done it a few times. I'm like, actually, what I'm noticing I need is,
Mm-hmm.
silence or whatever. And so having that dialogue even, and like continuing to revisit that consent or how's it going, seems like it would be so important when you're
Yeah.
working through and like deepening into this practice.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's ongoing, right? And so to start off by creating that container where that type of communication and dialogue is possible, it just really supports what happens in the next phases. Because I'm not going to be the same every day. They're not going to be the same every day. Sometimes I'm going to be low energy and kind of closed off, and sometimes I'll be shooting through the roof. So the needs will change. My needs will change. Maybe I'm not able to show up in the ways they want me to show up that day, but that also requires me to communicate. But another layer that feels just as important, because, and this is something that we've addressed in TIWL, right, is this idea that just because we are trauma informed practitioners doesn't mean that we're not trauma impacted practitioners, right? And so how we also are negotiating the exchange is very important. How I set boundaries, how I have my own red, right? This is when I need to stop, or a break, or a rest, or
As a
how I make
trainer.
as a trainer,
Beautiful.
right?
Yep.
Because trauma impacts us all, really, truly. So it's important for me to not position myself in a way that suggests that if they only work with me, all of their problems will be resolved and they will somehow walk away magically healed. If they work with me, the reality is most likely their problems will get a little clearer. The challenges they have will get a little clearer, and they will actually face them more head on. And in those moments, I'm going to be facing mine too. And
Yep.
that's part of the vulnerability and the intimacy of this work and dynamic.
I love it. I think there's sometimes so much of a stigma around naming it as you just so plainly as you just did, or I feel like maybe lived experience is something that people are sharing more about and acknowledging that we bring to the work. But there can still be this sense of like self-sacrifice that we have to do as providers, that it's like whatever the client needs, even if it's at our expense. And actually, that's just not sustainable. And it's reenactment of a trauma dynamic, right?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I think I've tried that a few times. Didn't work. Failed.
Yep. Same.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Had to be transparent about it. Like, hey, I tried. I think I went out of the scope of my own capacity trying. So you probably got the best parts, but I'm going to have to pull back here, 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 and here. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to be in this relationship. Or I'll be happy to refer you to a friend that you may be more compatible with. But yeah, I think that is important because no, I'm not going to be compatible with everyone. Like people who want to work with me, choose to work with me. We have conversations to make it clear like what we could offer each other inside of that trainer client relationship, right? How we desire to show up, what our needs are, um, just like any other relationship. But trying to cookie cutter myself as a coach to make myself accessible to everybody was probably the worst year of my professional career as a trainer.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
And I think that's, in some ways I can think about maybe it being more clear what those are, but other things that maybe are more subtle around these sort of interpersonal boundaries, the way that you show up, how someone wants you to assist them or facilitate with them, as being maybe more nuanced, but equally, if not more important.
Yeah. 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 I had to do a lot of reflection on what type of clients were generally attracted to me and what type of trainer were they looking for? Um, and I'm very clear on the type of person I am, right? I can be very domineering, just kind of, no fluff. I can be funny, but as my clients say, sometimes I don't know when you're joking or not. It's very confusing. And I understand that sentiment because my kids say the same thing. I can provide a lot of structure, but I'm also like hands off. I'm not gonna force anybody to do anything. Like I want to see that you want to do it, and then I can support. Um, so I mean, those qualities look different than my friend who's a trainer who is like, "Ah, I will put it on your calendars for you. Let me send you some meal ideas. We're gonna pray together. Do you want to come to my pool party? Right? Like that is not me. Like I have very rigid lines between my friendships and my clients. And a lot of folks who are attracted to want to work with me deeply appreciate that sense.
There's
Yeah.
safe. There's deep safety in that. I think it's like I
Yeah.
know where this container begins and ends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One thing
Mm-hmm.
you also said a little while ago that just struck me was, what did you say? That you want people to have an enjoyable experience. And I think sometimes people, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. I've gone to trainers or weightlifting with this sense of it's supposed to be punishment of some sort, or yeah, punishment. That's really the word that comes up.
Yep. 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 And if the trainer doesn't do it, then they've already done it to themselves on the way in. I ate the cookie yesterday. I have to do this to myself now. Um, so and this may be controversial, but I do think that there is a place in trauma informed practice where boot camp style instructors make sense. Um, because a lot of, even like, I think one mainstream culture kind of has created that and curated that image. But then also even just reflecting on my own clientele, that's what they like. Like if I go get a massage, I want to be massaged. I don't want to necessarily I don't necessarily talk about my kids or you know what I mean? Like lallygag around. I want to go in, I want to go out, and I want to get the job done while I'm there. So that's one, but also just thinking about this idea of punitive fitness feels um, feels like, again, a product of what we know to be toxic fitness culture, what we know to be an influencer to spiraling diets and yo-yo diets and yo-yo weight and over supplementation, or all I could keep going on about that. But to reimagine this work, where when folks are showing up in a space and they don't feel that sense of, you're here to hurt me, you're here to make me feel pain, um, and instead feel, I'm here because this feels good. I am here because this is one of my favorite parts of the week. I am here because I know when I leave, I'm going to feel awesome, is a part of that. I think that goes back to what you mentioned earlier when you were talking about that person who's, in the yoga class and doesn't feel like they deserve the love that they're getting. Like, there's so many ways that I think that some of those principles belong in weightlifting, and some of the weightlifting principles belong in yoga. Um, and, depending upon who's running the ship, how that actually really creates more access for folks to feel included.
Yeah, so there's so much there. I feel like we could have a whole conversation around what we just dipped into,
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely aware of our time wanting to honor that. But I wondered, one thing that stuck with me also from reading your bio and just from working with you in general is this concept of like body liberation, or exploring what freedom feels like in your body. And I wonder if you could kind of riff on that a little, because it's so powerful and such an antidote, I think, to a lot of what many folks experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that actually came out of some of my activism work when I was in Oklahoma City. I remember we were at the courthouse, and during that time, we were activating for Black women who had been sexually assaulted by a police officer, Daniel Holtzclaw. And I co-founded this organization, OKC Artists for Justice, alongside Grace Franklin. And during that time, people from all over the country were flying in to support these women. And one of the organizations was called Black Women's Blueprint. And I remember they were outside of the courtroom, and one of the sisters started singing. Inside of that song was like, what does freedom look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? And like, it really shook me to my core. I ended up creating a whole performance around just what freedom can be inside a body that included a lot of dancing. All that to say, um, I think there are so many stereotypes and stigmas and images that exist in the world that tell us that something is wrong with us. Something is wrong with our body if we don't look like this, move like this, think like this, or we not shaped like this. And like, how powerful is it to like throw all of that shit away and say, you know what? Um, I'm going to find the place that I feel the most freedom in my body. For me, one of those places is either like a dance studio or the beach. That's when I feel the most freedom in my body. But if I never asked myself that question, if I never allowed that sensation of like, wow, I feel so present, so here, I feel so much and so free, I would never have anything to resource to when I didn't feel free inside my body, when the bills were coming in, when the stress was coming in, when things were just going wrong all around. I could lean on the fact that I at least can identify in my toolkit some very specific places that feel like nothing but the most freedom I could possibly feel. And I think that's something that I really not just advocate for, but desire inside. It's like inside of a vision statement of sorts, is that all of us can at some point experience a moment where we truly knows what freedom feels like inside of our
So potent. And
body. Oh, thanks, Jen.
yeah, and I think you're right. A lot of us don't ever ask ourselves or have someone inquire about that or invite that exploration. Made me think about it too.
Yeah.
So is there anything coming up that you're excited about, new projects or things you want to share with us that are kind of coming down the pipeline with weightlifting?
Yeah, for sure. So much. We are getting ready to graduate our first cohort of Train the Trainer fellows. So these are people who have been through our certificate program and are now gearing up to lead more trainings for trauma-informed weightlifting. We're also excited to hopefully have more in-person trainings. We've been largely virtual, but Mariah Rooney, who's a co-founder of Trauma-Informed Weightlifting, and I had the opportunity to present in person for the first time in almost coming up on 4 years. We presented in person in May, so that was last month. And after that, I was like, all right, I choose this. I choose the in-person thing for sure. So, yeah, more opportunities there. We are getting ready to host our next certificate program coming up in September. So that's our biggest program. It's 8 weeks long, and some other specialized trainings too. We have so many of our practitioners work in different areas and different communities, from addiction and substance use to neurodivergent communities to adaptive athletes. And we want to bring some of that lived experience and trauma-informed approach to the work in more trainings. So yeah, that's another thing to look out for. And outside of that, all in all, just really excited about the team and a lot of the amazing transitions that are happening so that we can grow and expand, and looking forward to, continuing this work and, staying in the gym.
So great. Well, and thank you for all that you've already given to the fitness world around sort of changing norms, adding trauma into the conversation in a really meaningful way. It's powerful.
Thank you, Jen. It's been an honor to be a part of the Center for Trauma and Embodiment all this time too. So I've learned so much from y'all, and just looking forward to more.
Great. Thank you so much, Candace.
Thanks, Jen.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to share a quick reminder about an opportunity for healing professionals who want to deepen their work with somatic trauma-informed practices. The Trauma Center Trauma Sensitive Yoga Certification Program is our 300-hour online training that supports practitioners around the world in offering safe, embodied healing experiences grounded in decades of research and practice. Our next cohort starts in September, and applications are open until August 15th. And if you still need to complete the required 20-hour foundational training, you can join one anytime. Our facilitators offer them online and in person all year long. To learn more, start your journey with us at traumasensitiveyoga.com. Thank you so much for being with us today. To find out more about today's guest, head to healwithcfte.org/podcast. Follow us on Instagram at OnTraumaAndPower to stay up to date on future episodes. And be sure to like and subscribe to On Trauma and Power wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll see you next time. Take care.